As a first step toward restoring transparency and accountability to government, we will also reverse the overclassification of government documents, and in the coming days, we are going to make public remaining records relating to the assassinations of President John F. Kennedy, his brother Robert Kennedy, as well as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and other topics of great public interest.
Well, I don't know what he's up to. He's picking me like chicken, shucking me like corn, stewing me like an ice.
Dangerous is when the universe pick you and you put on the magic glasses. There's rules that go with them. You can never take them off. You never see things that they're supposed to be. You see things as they are. And you can never force nobody.
And before we go, I would like to wish a very happy birthday to my co-host and friend, Mr. Rob Clark, also known as the Triple B. That being said, here we go.
Thanks for that elongated intro, Joe. Welcome in, everyone, to episode number 329 of the Lone Gunman Podcast. We got a special guest this evening. His name is James Day. But we will get there in just 1 second. Joe, real quick, there was a Guinness World Record set over the weekend for the most guests on a podcast at one time. Can you guess the name of the podcast?
I have no idea.
It was called The Martin Talk Show.
What was how many guests?
140 at one time.
Whoa.
Yeah. But enough about that. We'll have we'll get into some Martin things with our guest a little later. James Day is a native of David Ferry's hometown of Cleveland, Ohio, Joe.
Oh.
He learned a little later that he attended the same Jesuit high school and university in Cleveland as Ferry. Both he and Ferry come from a line of Cleveland police and fire public servants. Is he a good guy like David Ferry?
From all accounts so far, yes.
Yes.
But we'll see.
His first 3 books were on the Catholic Church history before publishing The Mad Bishops, The Hunt for Earl Anglin James and His Assassin Brethren in 2023. In 2024, he put out around 25 free and original articles on the Kennedys and King assassinations. He has advanced research on Ferry, the Abundant Life Temple, that I'm interested in as well, and has been hammering away at the white supremacy aspect of the JFK case. He lives in the rural part of North Orange County in Southern California with his wife, 2 children, 9 chickens, Joe.
I respect that.
And 6 fruit trees. Hopefully they are lemons and oranges. Uh-oh. Where did James go? Uh-oh. We lost James.
I'm sure he'll be back in a second.
Well, hey, happy birthday, Rob.
Yes. Let's welcome some people in as he comes.
Yes. Let me message him. Okay. Oh, Colleen, we love you so. Thank you. Right off the bat, super sticker, hippo character really going fast on this chair, propelling the chair across the room.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thank you, Colleen.
And good evening.
Bless you.
Hello, Scott. Hello, Mr. Paul Cummings. Trey, of course. Paul, PSV Odyssey. Bungled. Colleen, of course, we already said. Sally says happy birthday as well. We saw Sally on Wednesday night, of course. South to West, hello. Zendar61. Tiny Dancer. And yes, Tiny, I did get the last email. I read it this morning. So, but we were joking around, Rob and I, after the members only stream, because it was also my birthday on a Friday when we had the live show. And how many years will we have to go before we have a year where both Rob and my birthdays fall on Pod Friday?
Yeah.
I have to wait 7 years, like when the comments go by.
James Day.
Hey guys.
Hello, sir. You have to trust me when I tell you. I gave you a hell of an introduction there.
I'll believe it.
And then
I'll rewatch it. I don't know what happened.
I don't either, but we're glad you're back, and hopefully you don't disappear on us again.
Weird.
Welcome to the show, buddy.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure and an honor for us to have you on.
Oh.
Like I told you in the email, I've had my eyeball on you for a couple years now, ever since that Mad Bishop's book. Because actually, I was telling everybody on our Wednesday show, I did a podcast 10 years ago. It's actually episode 8, like very, very early on, and it was called The Bishops of New Orleans.
Wow.
And talked a lot about this stuff, Earl Anglin James, because I came across this cache of his documents,
right? And
it had things like, if the bearer of this card gets pulled over in the state of Louisiana, they get a free pass. You let him go, things like that. So yeah, man, it's great to have you on. And I know we're going to be talking about the far right, KKK, Miltier, General Walker, things like that. So where do you want to start, James?
I just want to, first off, thanks for having me on, guys. Recently, I was listening to you. I did a night drive from Southern California to Northern California to San Francisco, and you guys kept me company. That was actually my intro to Janet Bannister's work through your show, so I really appreciate that. I gave her podcast a listen, and that actually opened the door to Huey Long, believe it or not, representing the Bannister family after the electrocution of Troy. And so it was like, oh, well, there's the Huey Long connection, because, there's his associates are Gerald L.K. Smith and Leander Perez, and both of them feature prominently in what we're talking about today. So, hey, it's awesome to be here, guys.
Yeah. Her podcast is awesome, isn't it? It's very interesting, a lot of history, especially in New Orleans, like you said, Huey Long, and Bannister's brother getting kidnapped. There's a whole bunch of good stuff in there. It's really interesting.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to season 2. I really hope she gets into Delphine Roberts, which would be awesome, because she factors into today as well. But boy, she liked to talk. And she liked to talk on op-eds and on picketing signs, which we have as evidence of I think, a good case of what was kind of the mentality going on down there with the Bannister operation. She was very vocal, and there was no way she was working out of her own sort of vacuum. This was part of a greater thinking. And what I'm referring to is white supremacy and Christian identity and pro-segregation and anti-Kennedy rhetoric and, anti-disarmament,
communism,
the policy, anti-communism, exactly. There's a lot there. Where do we want to start? Well, let me just put it to you this way. It was in 2005. I'm in school at Loyola Marymount in West LA, just about a couple miles north of LAX. And down the hill from our school, which is all built up now, but at the time it was the empty Hughes aircraft field. So that's where Howard Hughes was back in the day. And it was Paramount was using it, and they had built out Ground Zero for Oliver Stone's World Trade Center.
Oh, shit.
If you remember that movie. So he's shooting down the hill, and that particular year was my foray into not only Stone, but also JFK, the film. I think a lot of us came through that movie, right?
Yeah.
And it took about 15 years to return to the content of what was put out in JFK, because I sort of filed it away as I don't know what to think of this. There's a lot there, and actually because Oldman was so good as Oswald, you're kind of thinking he's got to be guilty, because the way he portrays the complexity of this guy is so good. I mean, particularly the scene where he's kind of beating up Marina, kind of like they're showing shots of him like really kind of being aggressive and acting out. So I was like, I don't know what to think, and it was actually reading about my second daughter was in the NICU. She had just been born, and I'm visiting the hospital at night, and I'm reading about like Gladio. And it's through Operation Gladio and all this that I came across Permindex and Clay Shaw. And I said, Clay, as in Tommy Lee Jones? What? I always thought it was in its own world, and I never thought of it outside the context of sort of like how Stone presented it.
Right.
So I saw like into the Vatican Bank, for instance. Some of Earl England James shows up as a guy who is giving away identification papers to people who were later involved in the Vatican Bank scandal. So that started the process of where and how I am here today on the Lone Gunman podcast, which I'm honored.
You're in the right place because, we've been talking for years and years about folks like of the same ilk as Earl England James, like David Ferry and Thomas Beckham, Fred Chrisman, these purveyors of false documents. And of course they're all excuse me indoctrinated into this old Orthodox Russian church,
which theologically makes no sense. There is no way you can combine Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy and make a church out of it. It's total nonsense. And I say this as a guy, and you mentioned this already, as a guy who had basically followed Ferry's footsteps from Cleveland through the same Jesuit high school at the same Jesuit university. So I kind of know where he was coming from in a way. I can't get inside David Ferry's mind anyway, but he knows better.
I wouldn't want to either.
But he knows better than okay, Pesci was good, but Ferry was really smart. Ferry, was a lot more dangerous than maybe Pesci played. I actually contacted Pesci's agent, and I was like, "Did he do any research in Cleveland?" And she's like, "No," but still though, it was kind of cool to hear back from that. But no, there's no way. So it's a complete fraud. There is an old Catholic church. Right. That spun off from the Roman Catholic Church. So there is some legitimacy there.
But it's more of like a church on paper and instead of a brick and mortar building that this is my church that I'm running type of thing,
Let's take Carl Stanley from Louisville as an example. Thankfully, newspapers have his addresses. You look him up, and it's like, this is where the Church of the Holy Apostle, where Archbishop Stanley presides over his weekend liturgies. You look up, it's his apartment. It's like this Louisville apartment complex. I want to put something out there that I think I haven't really digested yet, but let's just put it out there. I think, we know Ferry and Martin were visiting Stanley, right, in 1961, and they for this ordination into Stanley's church. We think there was a connection between Stanley and possibly Walter Profeta, certainly some kind of anti-communist connection. There's also a possibility he was related to the Shikshini Knights, the Sovereign Order of St. John of Jerusalem, possibly. But the key, as you know, is that they're out hitting the Louisville bars, and that's when they basically reveal to Stanley that there's a plot in the works to kill.
Uh-oh. Did he freeze up on you, Joe?
Yes, sir.
James, if you can hear us, you are froze up. All right. Hopefully he'll be back. He must be having connection issues. Here he is. Hang on. Let me add him back. There he is, unfrozen.
You guys are never going to have me on again.
Encino Man is back.
It's fine. It's we deal
It's
with
all
this
good.
a lot when we do live podcasting.
This is nothing, brother. This is nothing.
We've had a lot worse.
Do you remember where I left off?
Yeah, Stanley, Martin, and the bishops.
So where they basically told Stanley there's a plot in the works to kill the president 2 years before it happened. So I got the document. So Stanley excommunicates Ferry and Martin a few months later, supposedly because Ferry was homosexual, which is also a joke because that whole front was basically a homosexual front for, at a time when it was, you couldn't really be out there with it. So, but so I got the document, the bowl of excommunication from Stanley, and he's naming all the names. And these are all names that we're familiar with from the Bannister operation, from his detective agency. Even Bannister's on the list of excommunicated bishops, along with Martin and others. Really? So I listed all these maybe half dozen names or so, and I kind of checked them off. We know who these guys are. There's a couple I didn't know. And I connected with the son of one of these names, who's a Jesuit priest currently. He's retired now, but he got back to me right away. He says, I was in seminary when this all happened, so I can't really tell you much. I can tell you my father, whose name is the one on this bull of excommunication. My father worked with Ferry at Eastern Airlines. This is very interesting. There's another name, blanking on the name right now, a guy named Bell, I think, who's on this list, also an Eastern Airlines employee. So that's 3 Eastern Airlines guys who were excommunicated by Stanley in 1962. And I'm wondering, we're always trying to think, it has something maybe to do with the plot or the assassination or the conspiracy, but could it have been something related to that whole Ferry's on leave from Eastern Air because of, the sodomy issue? And there was that whole FAA, recent investigation, which is a very over the top investigation on that. I mean, they dug into who his teachers were and their interview, all these things. So I'm wondering, was he trying in some way to get out of that? I don't know, but I just wanted to put that out there to you guys.
Yeah, quite possible.
Yeah. So really quick, before we move on from that, did Ferry and Martin go to Stanley together and kind of get ordained? And obviously we know by the time of the assassination, they were not close. They hated each other. Jack Martin was responsible for kind of calling out David Ferry to the FBI, and he was interviewed, I believe, on the 25th when he came back. Do you think the start of their feud had anything to do with the Stanley Bishop thing and in 1961 and 2?
I think so. Yeah. So I think, it looks like Joe. It looks like Martin was the guy who was the conduit between Stanley and Ferry. It looks like Martin had already been brought into that world through Stanley, and then it became, let's get Ferry in and
kind of vouch for him in a sense.
Basically. Yeah. But yeah, like I present to you David Ferry, I think that's kind of what that was. And then shortly thereafter, early 62, there's that excommunication, and things move pretty quickly because, the next year the president's killed. And 62, 63 is when Ferry is making a bunch of those calls up to the puppet master, Earl England James, up in Toronto, maybe to lobby for something or, ask for some help. James made a career out of, as you know, dishing out fake diplomas, fake anything that you wanted. You just call him up. So he also, which is very interesting, when the newspapers, when Garrison's case broke out and James's name came up in that, the Toronto Star or something like that sought him out up there in Toronto where he lived. And he said, well, why do you think the president got killed? And Earl England James says, he went down to Texas to get the colored vote. And they said, we can't let that happen. So in the context of segregation and this whole right-wing thing, it sort of plays right into that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I know. I think Jack Martin's excuse for why he was so quick to give up David Ferrie, in 1963 is because of the whole Eastern Airlines thing. So I don't know if it was some kind of bitterness that he hung on to, or that's what he was fixated on. But I know that that's the excuse that he gave, for not liking David Ferrie anymore, at least at that point,
Yeah. That raises a point that I do want to touch on. So when I was looking into Martin's life, he really spent a lot of time of his youth in LA. But in 1943, his mother is living in Dayton, Ohio. Dayton, Ohio is really mostly known for Wright Air Force Base. And the address I found is really right in the shadow of Wright Air Force Base. At the same time he's there, Ferrie is about 60 miles north at that St. Charles Seminary at the same time. Now, I'm just saying, I've been accused of propinquity and all that, so it could be just a coincidence.
What year time frame is that? Huh? What year time frame is this again?
This was 43.
43. Okay.
Martin was born about in 21 or so.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, just Sally McNamara said white Texans killed him. Yes, that was Earl England James. He said white Texans. He went down to get the colored vote. And the white Texans said, we can't have that. So thank you, Sally, for that.
Yeah, we got some top-notch folks here that hang with us. They are very smart.
They are.
Just wait till we start talking about Shreveport.
Yeah. Yeah, I got a question or two on that. But Tiny Dancer, one of our members here, paying members, says she sent us an email earlier and wanted to ask Mr. Day if he was aware of the House intelligence actions in 96 towards legislative bans on religion and covert operations.
This is the first I'm hearing of this. This sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
TBD. So I'm going to dig into that.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't know. I remember listening to a podcast that Peter Levenda was on many years ago. And he had some very astute observations about the bishops and kind of what they could get away with. And, when you have a man, dressed as a religious official, I mean, they can go into hospitals, jails, pretty much anywhere unobstructed. Yeah. I mean, he said there was even one that managed to get into RFK's funeral.
Him, Levenda. It was Levenda.
That was him?
Yeah. He was 18 years old.
Yeah, and he managed to get into RFK Sr.'s funeral. He said he was like sitting like 2 rows behind, all the Kennedys, and nobody questioned anything just because he had on the right uniform.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, so if you're a detective agency like Guy Bannister and Associates, that's a great disguise.
Cover,
You get somebody like Ferrie who knows, like who's actually in 2 different seminaries, like legitimate seminaries. You're going to know the rubrics. You're kind of going to know how these guys walk and even how they talk. Because it is a little, it's a little different.
Yeah. Mannerisms, things like that. Sure.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, I gave Sally some homework, actually, to go watch Leander Perez's Firing Line with William F. Buckley. I don't know if you've ever seen that.
I have not.
It's a great watch on YouTube if you're ever bored for about 45 minutes. Yeah, it's something.
Yeah,
it was like it had to be in the late 60s, early 70s, and he's still pushing segregation.
I got a picture of Perez that I can show. We can talk about him if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, this is one of the folders. There he is. Leander Perez. One of the financial backers of the assassination, according to Willie Somerset.
Your screen share there at the bottom?
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
That's all right.
Damn.
Nice.
Leander Perez right there. A judge and a district attorney of another parish in New Orleans, in Louisiana.
That looks like the wrong tab. Looks like the email one.
Oh, shoot. You still got that up. All right. Well, take me off. I don't. Sorry, guys.
You could just stop sharing as well and just reshare it.
Right, gotcha. Well, yeah. Anyway, I won't waste any more time on trying to find that. But
Leander Perez looks like your typical white supremacist from the 60s. If you've seen Joseph Miltier, you've seen Leander Perez.
Yeah. Willie Somerset, again, you can't corroborate what Willie Somerset says because he's sort of like, I said this, or I'm quoting somebody. Well, you don't really, but he's never really proven to be wrong. He actually is, more often than not, his predictions proved right. An example I used was he called the FBI the week of the assassination of MLK on April 1st or something, and he said MLK is going to be shot this week. And sure enough, the April 4th, it was. He called a guy called Sap. So all these things he seemed to know. And, you guys, I don't know if you're familiar with the Dr. Edward Fields, who started the National States Rights Party, white supremacist movement. Back in the day, they had all these political parties that were popping up. That was how they were rebelling, right? They would run MacArthur, even if MacArthur wasn't interested, or Gerald L.K. Smith ran the Christian Nationalist Party for a little bit, so Edward Fields ran the National States Rights Party. He's still alive. He's 92. And he occasionally sends me his latest pamphlets, which
wow,
I'll gladly take. Yeah. But he told me he dismissed Summers. I sent him maybe 13 questions. Did you know David Ferry? Yes, no. And you just have to check him for me. And it took him 8 months, but he wrote back to me, denied knowing Ferry. He said Miltier was not in Dealey Plaza. But he said Willie Somerset is a paid FBI informant who lied for money. So he was really upset about Willie Somerset,
Would that be because of the Miltier thing and the call?
They got that on tape, so he had to lie about that.
And it's not the tape. The tape is a great evidence alone, but the fact that Somerset picked up Miltier from the train station, I think in Jacksonville, the day after, on November 23rd. And Miltier, a great case, Caulfield makes the great case, and others, that Miltier is standing right there in Dealey Plaza, right? Uh-huh. They're going to a Klan meeting in Carolina. So Somerset's driving him and he's driving him up to Carolina, and Miltier's loving life. He's super happy with what happened, but he doesn't want to. He's like, boy, you're asking a lot of questions about yesterday, to Somerset. Yeah. And Somerset's like that. I guess they were childhood friends or something. So they had known each other for a long time, but he doesn't want to push that he's getting information. So he kind of let it happen. They're going to a Klan meeting, and Miltier's focused on the next phase, which was to blame the assassination on the Jews. That was the goal. But on that car drive, he named names. He named 3 shooters that Rob Reiner and no one really, 99%, aren't talking about. It's shocking to me.
Yeah, or ever heard of. I couldn't even tell you. If I've read them, it's been a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we can discuss those names real quick.
Yeah, if you got them.
Sure.
Of course. Oh, of course. Willie Somerset said, per Joseph.
By the way, James, Willie Somerset has the best nickname ever.
What is it? Bucket Ass 88?
Bucket Ass 88, baby. Yes, sir.
Oh, back up for people that are behind on this. How did he get this nickname?
I agree. So he said, per Miltier, there were 3 gunmen in the zone. 1 was a guy called Theodore R. Jackman. 2 was a guy called R.E. Davis or Roy E. Davis. And 3 was a guy called J.D. Tippit.
Okay. Now you mentioned that, yeah. It's interesting. He mentioned J.D. Tippett's name.
It's not. It is, but the fact, he didn't just pull these names out of a hat, because I did extensive peeling back on who these were.
But at that point, to mention J.D. Tippett as a shooter was unheard of.
Oh,
it's a whole badge man thing in the 80s,
Right. And everything else that happened in the 30, 40 minutes, hour after 12:30, right after the assassination. So, but let me just kind of back up if I can and just say, this is where the Klan comes in on a very tangible basis, because R.E. Davis, first off, R.E. Davis is like at least 70 in 1963. So it's kind of weird that he puts that name out there. Yeah. But he, first off, is a preacher. He's a healing preacher in the Pentecostal tradition. He is an avid deer hunter. He is one of the main Klansmen of the Klan revival. So this is where I had to learn about the Klan too, beyond school. There was the post-Civil War Klan, reactivated after D.W. Griffith's Birth of a Nation in 1915. This R.E. Davis is supposedly one of those 15 who reactivated the Klan on Stone Mountain in Georgia. And he's one of the main, he's like the Imperial Dragon in Texas. This guy is huge.
Can you explain what rank that would be? Maybe like make an analogy of like a general or a colonel or a captain, for people that don't know.
I mean, that is like one of the top major general
president
figures.
In terms of general. Got it.
Certainly in the South, specifically too. He was a big recruiter. When he reactivated the Klan in 1960, he's recruiting in Louisiana. At the same time, per Jeff Caulfield, Bannister is doing some recruitment for Klansmen in Mississippi, which is interesting. So he's Klan through and through. He's a Pentecostal healing preacher through and through. His kind of acolyte is a guy called William Branham out of Indiana, also part of this Pentecostal healing preacher picture. Branham's acolyte is Jim Jones. Okay. So we've let this of Jonestown fame, right? So we've let this whole thing become so festered and unchecked that it paved the way for guys like Jim Jones and the whole Christian identity and the white supremacy movement that we're still dealing with today. So we have the Klan aspect there. By the way, R.E. Davis lived 3.5 miles from where Tippit was shot at like 10th and Patton. He was part of the Oak Cliff Oddfellows, such and such, that kind of thing. Also, John Collins, who was formerly in this church as a youngster and now writes about experiencing what it was like being part of this Pentecostal healing church, who has nothing to do with the assassination of the president. This was only through his own research of growing up under these Klansmen as a young man, as a youngster, points out that R.E. Davis was provided the equipment to Robert Surrey to print the wanted for treason leaflets. That equipment actually came from R.E. Davis, the same guy who Willie Somerset said pulled the trigger in Dealey Plaza. When Jack Ruby was doing his crazy gumshoe investigation on his own the night of the assassination up to the shooting of Oswald. He's fixated on the welcome Mr. Kennedy, right, in the Dallas Morning News. It sends him on. Go ahead, Joe. Sorry.
No, I said he was. I believe the ad was made by Bernard Weissman, right?
Jewish name, yeah.
Yeah, and he was very aware and worried that the Jews were to be blamed for the assassination. Am I wrong?
Yeah, exactly. He's in the Dallas Morning News office that morning, and he finds that really the Weissman thing is more of a front, really, for the John Birchers who put that ad out there. So he's fixated on this throughout the day. At first, he thought, "Oh, what a nice flyer! They're welcoming the president," and he's reading it, and he's like, becoming. But he's fixated on it so much so that at 4 a.m., after he was at the press conference at midnight, he took the sandwiches to the police, and he's like at the Oswald press conference, as we know. Then he took some more sandwiches to a newsroom, KLAF, where he knew somebody. And then at 4 a.m., he takes two buddies, Larry Crawford and George Senator, and they go out to the Stemmons Freeway, and they take the Impeach Earl Warren billboard. He was thinking that the people who were behind the Impeach Earl Warren billboard also had something to do with the derogatory flyer against the president. The P.O. boxes don't add up. They are different. But this is where Caulfield does some of his great work. It came from the same postal zone and postal zone 21 in Dallas. And that's so weird. Ruby actually goes to the postal office to find out where these boxes are. And he's able to confirm the one. And there's a bunch of General Walker P.O. boxes in this same post office. But he was never able to figure out who the post office box was listed on this Impeach Earl Warren billboard. Well, I found out who owned that P.O. box just last week.
Oh,
it's the wife of R.E. Davis, the Klansman that we've been talking about, whose Somerset was in Dealey Plaza.
Yeah.
So we have R.E. Davis, who's financially or giving equipment for the wanted for treason, that the president's wanted for treason, and R.E. Davis, whose P.O. box is behind the Impeach Earl Warren billboard. So that just kind of tightens up Davis even a little more. All right. I got to say this. Both Theodore R. Jackman, the other shooter who I mentioned, was also a preacher. He came out of Amy Semple McPherson's Angelus Temple up here in L.A. and the Life Bible College, and he was a teacher in the 30s when Wesley Swift was a student there. Wesley Swift, founder of Jesus Christ Christian. He was a rifle instructor for the Klan. I think he had a lot to do with what was going on. He was tight with William Potter Gale, who was one of MacArthur's colonels. They started the Christian Defense League and the Anti-Communist Liaison. So there's that whole kind of faction going on in Southern California that this Jackman guy was part of. Jackman, like Delphine Roberts, liked to talk. So he did a lot of op-eds about why that he didn't like Kennedy's disarmament policies, for one. He thought there were Congolese troops who were going to invade Georgia. He was putting that out as a fear-mongering thing in 62, 63. Okay.
Yeah.
He also, and he fronted as this expert in antiquities for Palestine, So, but according to Willie Somerset, he was one of the toughest killers, believe it or not, this Theodore R. Jackman.
Really?
Okay, so that leads us to J.D. Tippit being shot outside the Abundant Life Temple. 3.5 miles from where R.E. Davis lived, the Abundant Life Temple is also a Pentecostal healing revival place. It falls into this whole part of this whole tradition of these same kind of preachers that R.E. Davis and Jackman are. Moreover, it was founded and owned by a gentleman called O.B. Graham, who's mentioned in the literature. Was never brought before the commission though. Don't know where he was on the 22nd. But there's witnesses who say that an assailant of Tippit supposedly fled into this church as what Garrison thought is like this prearranged safe house that like opened up the door to like this whole, world of intrigue and stuff like that. In reality, though, and Garrison's investigators looked into the church. They found the list of incorporators. They thought they were trying to find a link to these names of these incorporators in Jack Ruby. They couldn't really figure it out, and that sort of seemed to be the end of it. I got on the phone and talked to the son of one of these incorporators.
Okay.
This guy's 77. The incorporator's name was George Sherrill, who's formed the Abundant Life Temple with Obie Graham. And he said, well, my father was Obie Graham's biggest supporter until 1962 or 1963. I said, boy, what happened then? He goes, he partnered with a guy from LA, a preacher from LA called O.L. Jaggers. My father did not like O.L. Jaggers' style and tone, and he broke away from Obie Graham. O.L. Jaggers is part and parcel with R.E. Davis, Branham. It's just amazing how it just, as a piece of a puzzle, went right together with all of what Willie Somerset was saying. He's part of that world, and he was doing things that apparently this George Sherrill didn't like, Moreover,
he was any relation to where Oswald worked there for a time in Dallas, Jaggers, Child Stovall.
I never thought of that actually, but it's worth looking into.
I mean, it's a weird last name, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
huh?
Yeah, that's cool. One other thing about Obie Graham. So both buildings, the Texas School Book Depository and the Abundant Life Temple, all right? You have JFK killed outside the TSBD. You have Tippit killed outside the Abundant Life Temple. Both those buildings were only moved in by its occupants in the months leading up to the assassination, as you know. I mean, right? The Texas School Book Depository was across the street until it started leasing from Byrd the actual building in 63. And so why are you laying floors, by the way, when you had a year and a half of unoccupied space that just sat there and you're not doing anything with it? Okay. And then you're like laying flooring when there's all these, what a sloppy operation, by the way. Those books, like those boxes, it's just a mess. I just got to put that out there.
We ask that question on here all the time about the floors. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and then it becomes kind of obvious. It's like, we're creating a distraction here, Yeah. But so that's that. So both those buildings were occupied by its current owners, and Obie Graham sold the Abundant Life Church in 64. So he was done. He was out of there. Obie Graham was a Civil Air Patrol chaplain in the Carolinas. He was called the Flying Evangelist because of his piloting abilities. So not only do you have the occupants of those two buildings moving in roughly around the same time, they're both owned by Civil Air Patrol connections. Byrd, of course, the wing commander of Texas and one of the co-founders, and now this chaplain from North Carolina or South Carolina. He's from the Carolinas originally.
Flying Bishop. That's associated with Cap David Ferry,
Exactly. And by extension, the cadet known as Lee Oswald in 1955,
Exactly. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Yeah, man, this stuff goes deep. I love it.
Yeah. Sally McNamara, I thought Tippit was in the boot while JFK pulled the squib.
We did a little expose. This is actually last year, or actually leading up to the 60th. Somebody put out this documentary called JFK.
Yes.
Yeah. It talks about the squib thing,
right,
which is just ridiculous. But yeah.
Yeah,
We had a good laugh about that.
we always do have a good laugh about it. So before I want to move on to General Walker, but before, could you talk about what kind of connections J.D. Tippit might have had to the far right before we kind of
Yeah.
move on?
Well, first off, I heard this. I just want to put this out there before I forget. There was a 2013 Dallas magazine, like the title is called like Dallas, magazine, that said Tippit worked part-time at the Texas Theater. That's interesting. I think that bears. I don't know if you guys have ever heard that before.
Heard
That
it,
was
yeah.
kind of weird. Have you heard that?
I have, yeah. It
Is
was
there
part-time there, part-time Austin's Barbecue.
right?
He would take various side jobs, even for Jack Ruby as kind of like a escort or bouncer at some of these private
bottle clubs, I
night
think.
kind of things. You
Okay.
know what I mean? That weren't at the Carousel Club.
Okay.
You know
Well,
what I mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
So the Austin's Barbecue is really where you can make the good argument that he was indoctrinated or at least maybe recruited by the right, because that was where the John Birch Society would meet quite often. Was this Austin's Barbecue? So to your question, I think that might be a way in. Boy, he's a mysterious figure though, for sure. But really, the Austin's Barbecue for me is where I would land in terms of his just an obvious way of him connecting with the right.
Yeah, I always thought he could possibly too on the police force, befriend some like-minded folks if that's was their mindset, you know what I mean?
Thanks, Rob. So the John Collins, who I mentioned, was doing a lot of deep dive into his own religious background, and only really through happenstance touched on the assassination by mentioning that R.E. Davis was the equipment provider of the flyer distribution that we talked about. He said that this R.E. Davis, this Klansman, was known to place Klan folk into the Dallas PD as like a way to infiltrate, or as a way to like maybe because he was into recruitment, as I mentioned. So that was something that he did that I think is bears mentioning.
Yeah, I know there was a set of photos that were taken as they were leading the three tramps through Dealey Plaza, right? And I think a couple of the officers were photographed with this weird patch that people tried to say was like a KKK symbol on their uniform. It's since been debunked.
Okay.
But that was the belief for a lot of years. It looked very similar, but it meant something. It didn't mean that's not what it meant. It meant something else. But I always thought that it's possible that he could have met like-minded people on the force. If that's the way his mindset was.
Yeah.
And then General Walker's buddy, Warren Reynolds, was working right around the corner from where JD got shot.
Tell me more about that.
Well, Warren Reynolds, okay, he was around the corner at a, I guess him and his brother owned a used car dealership.
Yeah.
And he was friendly with General Walker. Like he would go to General Walker's house and they would talk politics and all that stuff. But I think it was in January after the assassination, while he was closing up one night, somebody snuck down, followed him down the stairs when he was turning the lights off and shot him in the head. But here's the crazy thing. Yeah. They shot him in the head with a rifle. It didn't kill him though. They took one shot. And then they left, and he stumbled up the steps, and he was okay enough to like lean on the car and call the ambulance or whatever, and he ended up living, right? But before he got shot in the head, he wasn't really too sure about if the person he saw fleeing the Tippit scene was Oswald or not. But after he got shot in the head, he was fairly confident, close to 100% that the person he saw fleeing from the scene was Oswald.
Wow.
But yeah, I always thought it was wild when it came out that he was associated with General Walker.
Right.
Crazy. Maybe a coincidence. I don't know.
No, I can't imagine. And before you get, I know we're going to touch on Walker, but just these quote unquote killings shortly thereafter, right? Bannister, by the way, June of '64, he's dead. But that's just a very small example, as you know. But somebody, when I say the Klan, I don't necessarily mean, because these guys, it's a way for me to kind of use that as a way to explain the far right, because these guys are, back in the day, especially in the 60s, they're all part of these different clubs and organizations, and the Ladies Guild, and that kind of thing. So it's not like you can't really box yourself into like one thing. So when I say the Klan, I don't necessarily mean just the Klan. I mean, these guys can go home and then they're going to like Austin's barbecue for their Birch Society meeting, and then bowling with whatever anti-communist,
not wearing their white hoods 24/7.
Exactly. So, but my hunch is that somebody like that would have the capability and the motive, and thus the means to do these kind of takeouts of individuals like Reynolds, for instance. The dirty work kind of thing without a second thought.
And even when you're saying far right, a lot of these very rich oil men like H.L. Hunt were very far right and loaded. I mean, to the point of being like one of the richest persons in America at the time.
Yeah.
Leander Perez, loaded.
Yes.
Oh,
loaded.
Loaded. Dirty as hell and loaded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
they're still loaded
too. Sorry, Joe.
I'm sorry, they're still loaded. The Hunts still own the Kansas City Chiefs, who in 2 days from now we're going to be playing the Super Bowl, going for the first three-peat. So it's kind of funny that they're kind of still around. No one really recognizes that connection, right? The Hunts that own Kansas City being, I think, the granddaughters of H.L. Hunt. It's very interesting that they're still kind of relevant today, right?
I got to put this out there based on what you were just saying, and I'll do this delicately, but I don't care anymore.
Yeah, that's fine.
But I work in Catholic media. I basically, I went through Catholic school, so I've been involved in Catholic academia as my profession, and media. So there's different ministries within the Catholic Church, and we all kind of know each other for the most part. One of these ministries, super high up on the board, is Lamar Hunt. I think this grandson, one of the grandsons of HL, who had this, I guess, religious conversion. Obviously, they were not Catholic, so he had this religious, and I just want to talk to him, but I can't. I can only tell you guys.
Was he Protestant? Was that it, or Jesuit?
No. So, the Hunts in general, like HL.
Yeah.
HL came from a Protestant. I don't know the denomination. The Jesuits is an order of Catholic priests. So it's still Catholic, But HL Hunt, who was breastfed until he was age 7, certainly. Yeah.
There's a fun fact.
That is funny.
Wow. Explains a lot, though.
Yeah,
we like to have fun here, James.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah. And Sally is killing it tonight with the comments. She said, didn't Hosty, and I'm highlighting this because it's going to be a segue into the Walker questions. Didn't Hosty play bridge with Robert Surrey, Walker's kind of mate? She's from Ireland, Scotland. So, second in command, kind of, right?
Well, he's certainly Walker's mate, but I don't know. I don't know the bridge thing. And where do you guys come down on James Hosty?
That's a good one. I think he knew more than he ever said. I think he was more assigned to Marina Oswald than Lee Oswald. And I think that he was royally screwed over by J. Edgar Hoover, and he was quite bitter about it. Till he died, pretty much. Other than that, I honestly don't know. But yeah, he led a fascinating life,
Yeah.
Yeah, and with him and the whole destroying the note from Oswald, which I guess was referring to his contact with his wife Marina. I mean, all of it stinks to high hell. I know his book Assignment Oswald is a very interesting one, and he was Robert Surrey's bridge partner once a week or whatever time it was for a long time.
Wow.
And that's one of the interesting connections there. But
and I think Roger, one of our music man, Lee Harold Oswald, he's I think he's from the Kansas City area. He says it's right now the owner is Clark Hunt, and the NFL is rigged as the WWF. Yeah.
I know we're going to segue into Walker, but speaking of football, the fact that the Cowboys played that weekend in Cleveland, of all places, I've always thought that was just fascinating because of the nonstop coverage, and I think it was broadcast. I'm kind of
I think I remember hearing the recording of when they broke in the game, and they were like, we have an announcement, President Kennedy has been shot in Dallas.
No.
Keep playing the game.
Well, the game was Sunday, and right before the game, so the AFL, they hadn't merged yet. This is obviously 63, so
right.
The AFL canceled the games. The NFL decided to play. Now this is Murchison's. Jack Taylor may be able to help me out here, but this is Murchison's Cowboys, if I'm correct. But anyway, they're in.
Jack will be able to help.
They're in the locker room, and someone goes up to Tom Landry, Cowboys coach, and goes, "Lee Oswald just got killed. Jack Ruby shot him." Or I don't know if he said Jack Ruby shot him, but he's like the assassin of Kennedy. And Landry said, "Okay, thank you." And they go out and play, and the fans, of course, are just booing the Cowboys. Anytime they didn't even actually say Dallas. They just referred to Cowboys at Cleveland Stadium during that game. There was half the crowd was there. They did a 2-minute morning of silence. It was supposed to be a moment of silence and extended to like 2 or 3 minutes. It was just the most inappropriate thing to be doing, the Sunday before Thanksgiving. Yeah, the day before the funeral. Anyway. But my point is, though, was that in some way, I don't know, because the nonstop coverage that was going on, like NBC playing the Oswald debate and everything over and over and over again, I don't know, maybe not, but I just wanted to mention that.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So yeah, let's. I didn't know any of that regarding the AFL or the NFL, but Jack did confirm that they did get booed, and
it was Murchison.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So as we go to General Walker, maybe we'll go in chronological order and start with the Walker shooting.
And back then, Campese's was the caterer for the Cowboys.
Whoa.
Wow, man. Jack Taylor, look at that. Right.
He's
an NFL scout, so he would know.
Okay. Yeah, good to meet you.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's
Cowboy.
One of our top member supporters of the channel. So we love Jack over here. And so when we get to the Walker shooting,
right,
this is always one of those parts of the assassination that kind of spins my head. What happened here?
In what way, though? Tell me, Joe.
Well, in terms of was Oswald a part of the Walker shooting? Of course, when he had his possessions taken by the DPD, he did have pictures of behind Walker's house, so he was doing something around.
What they could have been planted, Joe.
They could have been. They could have been. I am not ruling that out. They definitely could have been. I think that was even discovered before the Walker letter, which was discovered on December 2nd, 63. So about like 10 days after. And I think
that he's supposed to be Marina.
Right.
If I get caught, here's what you do, type of thing.
Mm-hmm. And so I mean, just the fact that Oswald had pictures of Walker's house on him allegedly is mind-blowing. So like, what was he doing? I think there was some part of Oswald that was trying to infiltrate or spy on the hard right and Walker. And I think that kind of went over to some of the Cuban exiles as well. But, whether he was involved or not, and whether it was staged or not. And that is always, I go back and forth on that. I'm not sure. So I want to get your take. Do you think the Walker shooting was staged?
Yeah, probably. That's my thought. Now, this is just my opinion, but it just 7 months before the assassination, right around the time he supposedly gets his rifle and he gets the photograph, the backyard photos taken and all that. It seems very convenient. It seems convenient knowing, not again, like I don't know these guys and I don't know Walker, but knowing Walker, I might say that this is something flamboyant enough where he, would want to insert himself into the narrative.
I agree.
There's kicking myself here because of, Robbie made me close all my tabs. But no, I'm kidding. There's a tab I had open about there was there's a document, a statement made that a person saw somebody run in the alley behind Walker's house. They ran according to this person, I think it's the daughter actually, ran to the house of a known associate of Ruby as like a refuge. And I haven't dug into that more, but that is something that I want to learn more about.
Then you have another witness saying they saw two people back there
right.
that night.
And there's a car. There's a getaway car. Okay.
Right. A car involved, yeah. We know Oswald didn't have a license or drive.
Right. Yes, and for Walker to say, it made him look like I got my gun and I ran out to see who is that, and I'm doing my taxes, right? Because it's April 10th, and he just happens to lean forward and boom, it goes right behind him. And also
a Trump type move to the right, right? You turn your head.
Yeah, exactly.
Barely nicked his ear.
So that obviously seems very fabricated, but also who reported that, which was that German newspaper with obvious ties to Walker. I mean, Walker was in Germany, by the way. He was stationed there for a while.
And he was on the phone with them the morning of November 23rd.
Right, for an interview.
Right.
Like, or something, So he supposedly is with Ned Touchstone in Louisiana when this assassination happens. Although either on a plane or he's with Ned Touchstone in Louisiana.
Well, he was in New Orleans.
Shreveport, wasn't it?
He was in New Orleans.
Oh, yes, Shreveport. So, right. Kent Courtney, Leander Perez. He's having a meeting. Jack Martin's in there and Joe Newborough from Bannister's office. Okay.
Yeah.
Of all people. That's just a coincidence, though. So, they didn't know each other.
Yeah. Then he goes to Shreveport, and that's...
And actually, I'm going to have a follow-up question to that, but we have one of our top member supporters, Trey, who we call Shreveport Trey, because he's from Shreveport. And you might not know this, James, but Robin and I have gone down some rabbit holes, mainly me on Shreveport and some of the shady connections there. But he had a question for you, actually. He said regarding to Ned Touchstone, and
Yeah.
I honestly had no idea who he is. It appears that General Walker and Edgar Eugene Bradley both visited Ned Touchstone in Shreveport, Louisiana, right around November 22nd, 63. Do you think that Touchstone or had any foreknowledge of the assassination, or kind of what was that whole thing about?
Yeah. Caulfield breaks
and
us
explain who Ned is as well.
Yeah, no, well, so Ned Touchstone published something called The Counselor, like joining all these groups and all these like affiliations. Back then, you also did a lot of newsletters publishing.
Oh, the newspaper. The newspaper.
Yeah.
We read from
Counselor.
that.
So that was him. To me, he seems like I need a Louisiana alibi or something. Oswald Walker saying that, I think, about Touchstone. That's basically it. But Caulfield will do a whole rundown of that meeting, and Braid and Edgar Eugene. So I recommend that. I know you guys. I think you've had him on, right? Or at least you talk. At least you referenced the book. At least, yeah.
Caulfield.
Yeah, but
no, we've never had him on. My friend Doug had him on his show a couple years ago. And let's just, for the benefit of the audience, pop this sucker up here, right here, because this is a great book, folks. If you have not ever read it, I highly suggest you buy it. It is a thick boy. It is top tier reading. Okay, it's like high level. So don't be discouraged if you buy it and start reading it and be like, oh, all right, I'm lost. But just stick with it. And it is a great book, a great resource on all things Walker, Miltier, Bannister, G. Ray Gill, the whole nine, far right, great book. Can't recommend it enough.
I call it the best book on the assassination you ever heard of, Yeah.
Never heard it. Yeah. A lot of people never heard of it.
I couldn't believe it, by the way, when I remember getting that from an interlibrary loan when I first got my hands on it. And I was thinking it was going to be like the size of like Appointment in Dallas. It's going to be like maybe 120 pages or something.
Right.
This thing shows up, and I was like, "Oh my God!" I said to the lady who was like freaking out. But yeah, he's awesome. Another Cleveland guy. He also got into the assassination by way of interest in Ferry, so we kind of connect over that. I talk to him maybe once a week. So yeah, he's awesome. But also when Walker's on the phone with the German reporter, as you say, that weekend, he slips. He lets it slip that, I just got here 4 hours ago, So was that just an error, or did he really just get into Louisiana 4 hours earlier and he was somewhere else on the 22nd? I'm sure,
He never just got into Shreveport, but yeah, as far as I know, he was in Louisiana on the 22nd.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think he made some big deal on a flight that he was on, that maybe he was on during the assassination, right?
Yes, that's what he said, right? That he was in the air.
Yeah, they landed in
He was in the air,
yeah.
right? Supposedly. Another flying connection. They're all over, but
and that must have been a hell of a short flight from New Orleans to Shreveport. I mean, why would you even stop there? But there was a gay 90s club in town, Joe, so that might be why General Walker stopped there. Got to spend the night taking some sights.
Are you guys familiar with Paul Trejo's work, The CIA Did Not Kill JFK.com? Okay.
Oh, yeah. Love Paul.
I also speak with him quite frequently. He says, and I don't have the details here, maybe one of you guys do, but Oswald was supposedly picked up the night of the shooting, of the Walker shooting, by the PD. Are you guys familiar with this?
Yeah.
This comes from
himself in a letter.
Himself, actually. Yeah, in later years, I think to the church committee or something. Yeah, he says that according to an inside source at the Dallas Police Department, Jack Ruby and Lee Oswald were picked up that night and let go on orders from the Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy. And he believed this till the day he died. There's even letters referencing it up into like the late 80s, early 90s. That's what I don't know if he really believed that, but that's what he was saying. He believed it for like the last 20 or 30 years of his life. I don't know if somebody fed him a story or, or who knows.
Yeah.
It's one of those things you can never, ever try to figure out, it's not enough details.
Can I just go off? I know I'm growing chronologically. I just got to ask you guys a question. While I have my one opportunity to do so. Did, in your opinion, Oswald leave as the story is, via bus, via cab, etc.? Or is this, where do you guys come down on this Nash Rambler thing? Where do you think he was, by the way, when it all happened? And because I'm just going off of here, this whole idea of the only assassin in world history who relies on public transportation for his escape. I just got to ask you guys. Well,
real quick, my good friend Bart Camp. I don't know if you've ever heard of or familiar with his work. He wrote a book. It's called Prayer Man. Okay, and it's about this mysterious figure that's called out in the doorway of the school book depository. I'm sure you've heard the theory of that before. But he has a really great website. It's www.prayer-man.com. And he's found the, I think it's Hostie's interview notes and Bookout's interview notes.
FBI.
And these supposedly had never been seen before, past a couple years ago. And I think Malcolm Blunt scanned them at the archives like back in the 90s and just threw them in a box and never went through anything. And then Bart was tasked with scanning all this stuff and uploading it to the internet. And then, of course, he found this stuff. And what's interesting is in the because a lot of these guys that were interviewing Oswald, they would take contemporaneous notes, but then they would go back afterwards and write them up in an official report or make them neater or whatever the case may be. Because we always knew the Bookout, it had interviewed him, Hostie had interviewed him, Harry Holmes had interviewed him. So on these Hostie notes and Bookout notes, Oswald actually gave them an alibi in these notes. They wrote it down. And he said he was out front
Bill Shelley.
with Bill Shelley and watching the presidential parade. And it's in Fritz's notes as well, but it is also in these other two guys' notes, and it's said in a different way, but all of them basically are saying that I was watching the presidential parade, right? So he gave him an alibi, but they never put that out there, because that's always a question. Where were you at the time of the shooting? Why wouldn't you ask that question?
First thing,
And they did, and that was his answer. So that's the original thing. So in the other question, as far as him leaving, in the course of doing this show, of course, I try to come up with different show ideas all the time, but one of them is trying to time out, from the moment of the shooting. You only have certain time posts. Okay. So you have the shooting happening at 12:31 p.m. Okay. The next definite sighting. Now there's others, but the next definite sighting we have of Oswald is supposedly by Earlene Roberts,
the landlady,
right? And this is excluding the bus driver and the cab driver.
Yeah.
Okay. At 1:00, because she was watching her soap operas or whatever. She knows what time he came in, and she said he only stayed a couple of minutes and then he left.
In a hurry, and he just ignored her.
Yeah. And then, another time post we have is, of course, Tippett's death.
Well,
right?
Yeah.
And that's a mess.
Yeah.
Okay. But even given the benefit of the doubt, say you put his death at 115, 116.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, and that's what they tried to do. There's still technically not enough time to get there and do that by then. Because according to Earlene Roberts, you know, while Oswald is changing clothes, because he said he changed clothes, you know, he wasn't Clark Kent Superman, you know what I'm saying? He changed his trousers, his shirt, and he was putting on a jacket. And they did find what he wore to work that day in his dirty clothes drawer in his rooming house. They have pictures of it. It was like a burgundy shirt and gray pants. And he changed into some black trousers and a white t-shirt, and then that weird brownish rusty looking shirt that he was wearing when he was arrested.
The Eisenhower jacket or whatever, or is that what?
Yeah, that he didn't own. Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Great.
But, you know, there's several different time posts, and this is what's, you know, it's been argued for 60 years between researchers about, you know, did he really do this? Was he really on the bus? Did he really get a cab ride? You know, what time? What, you know, because you have the cab driver saying he dropped Oswald off 7 blocks past his rooming house. Well, that takes time to walk back 7 blocks, you know, and we don't know exactly what time he left the school book depository, you know, because you got to figure it was a madhouse right after then, you know, crowds of people. The only person we have saying they saw him leave was Beale Frazier, and we don't know if we can believe him or not because he told several different stories about it. So, and the woman that saw him, his old landlady that saw him on the bus, she's not reliable witness.
Yeah. Crazy.
You know, and there's things with the stamp and the
transfer,
and all of this, all that. And then of course you have, like you said, the Roger Craig thing with the getting in the National Gambler, and you have supposedly Tippett waiting at the Glocko station across the Houston Street Viaduct, as if he's waiting for somebody to walk by or get off on a bus, and then all of a sudden he hightails it out of there, you know, like he's going somewhere in a hurry. And, you know, his weird behavior of going in the top 10 record store, pulling somebody over and looking in the back of their car and just weird things before, you know, he gets killed. The whole thing's a mess. And the short answer or the long answer is, I don't know. You know, it's still a puzzle, you know?
Yeah. And to give my side of it, I do think that he was kind of caught off guard, Oswald, and Rob and I have done some work in the past maybe a month or two and talked about this and how Beale Frazier gave him rides much more frequently than Frazier admitted.
Yeah.
So he might have felt like he was like under some pressure and maybe tried to get a cab. And of course there was a account that he gave up a cab to an old lady, which of course doesn't go to you're in a big rush. So I'm not sure exactly either, but I do think he was probably at the rooming house at 1. I think the Tippett shooting was probably 110, much closer to that. And, you know, I get on treadmill at the gym.
Throw in Oswald lookalikes and Oswald impersonators if you're being sinister.
Yeah. But I mean, you could do
like Larry Crayford was an Oswald lookalike. A lot of these Jack Ruby and Oswald sightings were because of Crayford and Ruby. You know, they were at the diner the night before the assassination, and the waitress was like, Jack Ruby was here with Lee Harvey Oswald, you know, late in the night. But it actually was Jack Ruby and Larry Crayford eating there at like 2 a.m. the night before the assassination.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And she said it was if Lee Harvey Oswald had a little scar above his lip, then it was definitely him. But guess who did? Larry Crayford. And even in his testimony, he admits to eating with Jack Ruby at this Lucas B&B restaurant the night before the assassination, like 2 a.m. Yeah. So a lot of these Oswald Ruby sightings are because of Larry Crayford.
All right.
Yeah. You know, and back then a lot of these guys just kind of looked the same. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Clean cut, white guys, skinny, dark hair, you know,
Yeah.
it's.
Yeah.
I mean, Michael Caine looked like him. You know, if you looked at the picture of Michael Caine,
Oh
looks
my
just like
gosh.
Oswald.
Yeah. Mhm.
You know, Frazier looked a little bit like Oswald, even though he was
Right.
taller, but he still kind of, you know, they all just kind of look the same at a
Right.
glance.
Right.
You know, unless you're really studying them, but they're all
Yeah.
just, you know, 140-pound
Right.
white guys
Right.
with cone dark hair, and you know, clothes weren't
No.
fashionable back then. You know,
Totally, man. Yeah.
So I don't know.
No. I was just saying, it's all what you just said. It's all like more mon pop to me than like elaborate Central Intelligence stuff. This does not seem like an operation that would be coming down from, like in JFK, when, you know, Sutherland is talking to Costner outside the Washington Monument, and you got Kevin Costner taking notes, like he's learning some important things. You know, that doesn't really equate to me personally. It does feel a little more like the creaking doors of the Dallas police. It just feels like really more like just like real, you know. And these guys are young.
I always looked at it like this, James. Like, all right, whatever the hell was going on in New Orleans, okay, that's something totally different than what happened in Dallas.
Right.
Okay, because you don't
Different
have
operations.
You don't have bleed over. You know, you have Oswald's the only bleed over, really. Now you can bleed over organizations or ideologies, right? And things like that. But when you look at what Oswald was doing in New Orleans, and that's if he was legitimately portraying himself as pro Castro and pro Marxism, advocating for fair play for Cuba, and you know, if you can believe that, or was he just playing a part? You know, was he really anti-Castro, really anti-Cuba, you know, anti-communist? He's hard to figure out. He's a guy that's really hard to figure out.
You know, Rob, that's a great point, because I got to say this. Tell me, you know, it's like when you study the assassination, yes, Oswald is integral, of course, but if you start going too much into what he was doing, you're sort of like getting distracted, because it's not just about Oswald, right? There's more to it than that. It's the assassination is not the study of Lee Oswald's life, right? Which is what the Warren Report made that to be. You know, it's a weekend of 3 murders. You know, there's way more going on than just this one man. And so I think that's what happened. When you have what was he doing, and where was he going, and who was he with, and what was he doing in New Orleans, you're missing what was happening in Dallas, or what the Southern California folks were doing, or Harry Dean's story, you know, and all of that. So it's an opportunity to put that out there.
Yeah, no, I think there were many operations caught up with each other and overlapping, and that's why it's such an extraordinary case. And so
multiple cover-ups to cover your own ass
for multiple different reasons too. Right. Everyone had their own reason.
Totally.
Right? So it's.
I mean, you don't think J. Edgar Hoover knew, first off, obviously, what Bannister was probably doing? He was a special agent in charge, for God's sake.
Oh, for sure.
Direct contact.
Well, Bannister had his direct office number. You know, they were friends.
Yeah. According to Janet, they were corresponding right up until Bannister died, a couple weeks before. And she said that on here and on her podcast. So it is much deeper, and it's intelligence, spy games. It's
Cold War intrigue.
Yeah. Exactly.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that all of this was plotting to at that moment. What happened on the 22nd and how it happened does not mean all these entities were part of what exactly happened. They may have had their own plans, certainly. Right. That doesn't mean what like for instance, the Miami thing or the Chicago plot. That was its own thing. Did that happen? No. What happened was what happened in Dallas. You know, that's what we have. You know, so I just don't. When you start to think it's this blanket, vast conspiracy thing, you know, you're kind of everything is important, so nothing's important kind of thing, and you miss it. You know, you miss details. and connections.
100%.
Anyway,
So, James, we had a little surprise for you. So, just to give the background on this, have you ever heard of the John Martin video? The video that captured Walker's house pre-assassination, and then the Oswald fracas on August 9th, 1963, on the same roll of film, taken by a gentleman, a kid by the name of John Martin. Have you ever heard of this?
no.
Well, I have a little. Rob and I have.
Here to have your mind
Yes.
blown.
We have some. We have a video we're going to show you, first of all, of the John Martin film. And then Rob and I have done some research into this, and we're going to follow it up. But the reason we're mentioning this to you is it has to do with General Walker and the far right. And we want to get your.
Yes. Just keep in mind that this film, it's short. It's like, what, 2 minutes, Joe, or something
We're
like that?
not even play all of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep in mind that this was taken pre-assassination.
Summer 63.
There was footage taken in August of 1963 at General Walker's house, and then the video cuts to New Orleans and captures Lee Harvey Oswald in the street fight with Carlos Bernier, all on the same roll of film.
All right. All right.
Joe.
So this is there's no sound, but this is him on the plane to Dallas. He's coming from Minnesota. Is on the 6th floor museum website. He is.
We stole it.
I downloaded it. I think they let you do that.
Yeah.
Shout out 6th floor museum. Go there for some great videos in oral history.
Get that watermark off.
So this is allegedly from inside Walker's house. And the bullet hole
in the window
right
frame
here.
there.
Okay.
So,
and this is looking out that window, and that wall out there in Walker's backyard is allegedly where the shots came from. Ignore the white Nash Rambler in the party. In the
that's the neighbor, allegedly. And that is his house. And this is Walker's house here. And it is blackened to high hell. They edited this video. We have slides from the 90s which show it way brighter than this.
It could be how he's shooting, though, his exposure.
Well, we have slides from the original film. This is the
Mailbox.
mailbox that says General Edwin Walker.
Okay.
Right.
Wow.
And this is just building a.
This is footage from a 17-year-old kid, by the way.
Some people in front of Walker's house there. We cannot tell who they are.
Young boys, as we call them.
Gotcha.
And then.
May or may not be Latino.
Right. And he's back on the plane. He's going to New Orleans. Oh. Sorry. Fuck that up. He's in the New Orleans Zoo area. He's taken some pictures up in front of the
Cypress tree.
yeah, what was it? Franklin Park or
Not sure which zoo it was, but we'll see a nice big old seal here in a minute, I think. A New Orleans seal?
not many of those.
No.
Hold on. Can't. Oh, there's the seal.
There he is.
He's doing some
He's a buddy.
sightseeing, but somehow this young 17-year-old kid. This is behind like the town, in front of the town hall, city hall. Oh, and there's the fracas. There's Oswald.
There's Oswald.
Bernier. Some mysterious person walking in the back. The handbills
There's
that were torn up.
spires.
And he is on the plane back then. I believe he goes back to Minnesota.
Minnesota.
So this video came I think became like fully aware by the community in like 2007, 2008, like mid 2000s, and it is on the same roll of film. And so it was alleged that this guy, John Martin, who took the film, served under General Walker. This was the community consensus for a long
Okay.
time. 2 years ago, Rob and I, we presented at Lancer. We did a presentation on all the different Martins in the assassination, and we did a kind of deep dive on this guy. We figured out that he did not serve under General Walker. In fact, he was
A 17-year-old kid in 1963.
17-year-old student who filmed the John Martin film, included both Walker's house and Street Fracas on the same reel of film. Contrary to some of the community's long-held beliefs, John T. Martin did not serve under General Walker, as he was only 17 years old in 1963. So he would have been like 14, 15 when Walker was in Germany.
Yeah.
But there is a far-right angle to this.
Yeah.
Yes.
And Rob and I killed ourselves for probably 6 months trying to figure out who this guy was. We probably went through 24 John Martins. But we found this John Martin, who was in military academy, right? And we actually, this is credit Tom Scully. It was like a deep education forum. But this is what his high school bio says. Plans to enter politics. He loves chess. Very conservative Republican. Wants to abolish the Supreme Court.
Gosh, impeach Earl Warren.
Yeah. And that, I think, came from, I think you mentioned it, the 1954 decision, the Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yep.
Which started this whole, get rid of the Supreme Court thing, which I didn't even know was the far right political stance at that time. Yeah. If it hadn't been for FDR. So
St. Mark's, that's interesting. Maybe a Catholic thing there. Okay.
Yeah. This was in a Cretan military academy. And I actually went to military academy as well, Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. But so we did some crazy deep diving, and we found the student directory for the University of Minnesota at the time of
love this
1964.
Well, tell them the reason we were looking at the University of Minnesota for this guy first.
I don't.
Okay, so have you heard about the researcher Harold Weisberg?
Whitewash.
Okay. Yes. So Harold Weisberg was giving a talk at the University of Minnesota in 1968. And he was contacted there by this John T. Martin. He said, "Hey, man, just so you know, I have a movie that has Lee Harvey Oswald in the street fight. Are you interested in it?" And Weisberg was like, "Hell yeah." Because, of course, Garrison was trying to figure out who this mysterious Cuban or Mexican was with Oswald during this street fight. And he thought maybe there was something on this film that could, clue him in a little bit better. So they went to somebody's house who was a film major there at the University of Minnesota. What was his name, Joe?
Patsy. Mike Patsy.
Yeah,
you can't make it up. We're not joking.
Yeah, you can't make this up. So they go to Patsy's house, and John T. Martin makes a copy of this film, and he tells Weisberg, I gave it to the FBI right after the assassination, but they said it wasn't any value to him, and they sent it back to me. And he asked him, was it different when they gave it back to you than when you gave it to him? And he was like, yeah, there were some things cut out of it, but this is what I have. What we just watched is basically what he gave to Weisberg. And he had sent a copy of his film to Garrison on his own a couple months prior to Weisberg even coming to the University of Minnesota. And so he made researcher Gary Schoner, and who was there with Weisberg, each their own copies of his film. So there was never very many copies of this film ever, right? Ever. Fast forward to the HSCA, they contacted him, and he gave them a copy of his film, or the film that he had, he gave it to them. And they copied it and then gave it back to him and said, "Thank you very much." Right. And then fast forward to the early 2000s. For some reason, this guy comes out of the woodwork and says, "Hey, I've got this film." Because the HSCA claimed that they didn't have their copy anymore. And so he comes out to the 6th floor museum and he says, "Hey, I'd like to give you my copy of my film. I don't want it anymore. The only thing that I want from you is to never, ever contact me ever again. And don't give out my contact information to anybody about this thing. I'm done with it. Here
This
you
is
go."
Martin.
Right? Yeah, this is Martin. So the 6th floor takes possession of the film. They examine it. Well, lo and behold, there is a created date on the film of 1977. So somebody at the HSCA took his original film, gave him back a copy of his own film, and he thought he'd had his original all these years. The Weisberg copy is nowhere to be found. I've checked with the Weisberg archives, the people there, they don't have it. We've been in contact with Gary Schoner to see if he could find his copy. He says he still probably has it somewhere in his attic or his garage, and he just doesn't ever. And he's very elderly. He's almost 80 years old. He can't really look for it or find it. So, we've been trying to find the original film, as much of the original film as we can, because this copy is so darkened and deteriorated or whatever's wrong with it. But yeah, that's the backstory.
Yeah.
Because there's actually another John Martin Jr. film of the assassination. He was a postal annex employee in Dealey Plaza. John Martin Jr. was his name, and he was also from Minnesota. Okay. So he may have been related to this John T. Martin in some weird way if they were on vacation. You know what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah, and this the John Martin Jr. film actually is the one. He films them as they're turning from Main Street onto Houston, and then he runs across Dealey Plaza and up to the Grassy Knoll area, and that's actually where you see Roger Craig in the back. Where the trains are. That's his film.
Wow.
Yeah.
So we started going down this rabbit hole of people. J. Martin, and of course, there's Jack Martin.
Yeah.
Right. That's the obvious one. And we found 36 or 37 J. Martins associated with the Kennedy assassination in some form or fashion.
Yeah. For sure.
But that's our little tie to the far right.
Well, I want to
kind of, we were kind of figuring, Joe, that somehow this 17-year-old kid who's far right in his ideology is pen paling or writing General Walker, is in some kind of contact. And we know General Walker had his proclivities, you know what I mean, for younger men, especially if they're far right, same ideology type of thing. And hey, General Walker, I look up to you, you're one of my idols, blah, blah, blah. And, if they're going back and forth, and he says, hey, my family's coming to Dallas on vacation. Would it be okay if I came to see you and talk to you? So Walker's house. We don't have pictures of him and General Walker, but we have pictures from the inside of his house, which means he was in the house. And then all of a sudden he's in New Orleans and just happens to catch Oswald on film. That's kind of weird, don't you think?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Especially when Walker has connections to people in New Orleans, like Bannister, who could have said, hey,
right,
you want to do something for me? You got that camera there. Take that camera down there around the corner and catch this guy on film handing out these pro-Castro leaflets.
Yeah. They were trying to, because they had the news, one of the local TV stations was somehow there too, recording this, and that's how it ended up. Like,
Well, no, that was something different. That was something different.
Was that the altercation? Oh, that was the altercation. But
yeah, this was the fight with Brignier, and there was there's actually 2 movies of this.
Okay,
they were both taken by teenage boys.
Okay.
This guy was one of them, and there's also another one from a different angle.
Wow,
and it's real short and about the same kind of thing. But yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, go ahead, Joe. I'm sorry.
It's okay. No, and just to finish off the couple slides here, we found the student directory for University of Minnesota, and we found hold on. Oh yeah, so on the right hand side here, we found his name in the directory, 1752 Eagle Heart. That also is the same address John T. Martin later became a Minuteman. James.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So this is the FBI document of his Minuteman card, and it matches the 1752 Eagle Heart. So he didn't serve under Walker in the Army per se, but he might have served under him in the Minuteman or some other capacity. So what Rob and I figured out was, based on his bio, right, super conservative Republican, like Rob was saying, the most likely scenario was this kid went to Dallas, talked to General Walker, went inside his house, and possibly was then given, he said, how can I help, right?
Yeah.
How can I help the cause?
Yeah.
Well, if you go down to New Orleans, maybe film this commie, or go to New Orleans, talk to Guy Bannister or Jack Martin or whoever, and then maybe they gave him the task to film the fracas, because it would be 1 in a million type of thing to catch both of those in the same reel of film. This is the FBI document of his
oh wow,
giving the FBI his his film on December 1863, and then the airtel back to him saying it's been returned to you. So we have all the documentation, and I want to show you this. This is some of the slides we have on the right from
the original.
Yeah, from the original film. You can see it's much lighter.
Yeah,
on the left is the 6th floor copy, much darker. Who was the guy we got?
Martin Shackelford.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Some of his screenshots. This is another example of it. You can see the bullet hole on the left on the screenshot is much more
looks like
light
compressed or something on the
right. It's like almost like a screen recording, almost like
right.
Like you're recording it, like taking a phone, like recording it from another phone, losing a bunch of pixels, and and this is another one. So we're quite sure this film was edited and darkened. Why? Probably to protect some identities. But like Rob mentioned, we had talked and corresponded with Gary Schoner, who is the only man alive to have seen John Martin, because he personally was given the film when him and Weisberg worked together in Minnesota. And we've been trying to get him to find his copy. We're not very optimistic he ever will. But so we kind of debunked he served under Walker, but there's a right-wing element here for sure.
No, totally.
And we learned it through the yearbook and through his high school bio. So what are your thoughts on that, sir?
Thanks,
I know we're throwing a lot at you.
No, I love it. It just, Jack Martin from New Orleans wasn't always called Jack Martin. He was born Edward Suggs.
Yep.
So he adopts this moniker at some point.
We have like 5 aliases for him.
Yeah. But it seems legitimate from the documents that you pulled up, and he was such a young man, this Minnesota one, that, that seems to be his given name.
John and Jack. I mean, they're
sure.
The film was referred to as the Jack Martin film for a long time.
Yes, that's the other.
Created a lot of confusion.
Yeah, it was like Jim Braden or Eugene Brading, or they get confused.
Or even John Kennedy. They called him Jack, right?
Right.
So
exactly. And current Senator Kennedy, who I have to remind myself, it's not our guy, unfortunately. It's just devastating. I should never have happened. And to me, the right wing is just the most obvious suspects, especially at that time, Cold War, and they were seeing this young Catholic come in and who was talking disarmament. Not that I think Kennedy was, a saint, certainly. I don't. One of the things I think JFK, the film, does is that it tugs on our emotions at the beginning with that open montage about how awesome it was watching these home movies at JFK. I mean, that's cool and everything, but there's far more complexity going on than this was the good guy and these are the bad guys. So anyway, but man, you give me a lot here to think about.
We've been sniffing around too with these Cuban exiles, anti-Castro Cubans, mercenary types, right? People like Interpen and Lauren Hall, Lawrence Howard.
Right. So,
and you notice these guys were in Dallas meeting with these far right guys like Lester Logue and General Walker.
Philippe Vidal, a confirmed meeting with Walker early November.
Yeah,
the ties get crazy.
Right. So there's that claim from Beckman that he was delivered that package for Ferry to Howard, contained cash and blueprints, and it's an attempt. I don't know if it's true, right? I mean, again, it's one of these testimonies, but you're saying there's hardly any bleed over, right? From New Orleans to Dallas. That's something that tries to tangibly connect the two. I do have to say this. So remember, Roger Craig said, of course, that he found the Mauser, right? That was the big thing. Obviously, this. In the Warren Commission, there's a document that the weekend of the assassination, the FBI got a call from a guy in Cleveland who said that there was I went over to this guy's house I'm a contractor. I went over to this guy's house to estimate some work for him. And while I was doing some work for him, he wanted to show me something that he was so proud of. And it was a Mauser. And he was so excited that he was sending this Mauser to somebody in Dallas. And this was on November 9th that this happened. And of course, the Mauser becomes the Carcano, and the FBI forgot about that. But that document still exists. I thought it was interesting because it was a Cleveland connection. Of course, I'm thinking of Ferry, and the contractor who called the FBI says that the guy's house he went to was a firefighter. Ferry, of course, comes from Cleveland firefighters, Moreover, the house where this Mauser was that was going to Dallas 2 weeks before the assassination is about a mile from the Ferry home in Cleveland. I don't know. I think that's pretty awesome. If Ferry had something to do with the weapon getting over there somehow, but you never know. But man,
well, it's alleged too that Ferry was delivered 4 Mannlicher Carcanos.
When
from Baltimore, or what was that from, Joe? They referenced it in The Irishman.
Yeah. There's a Ferry named Ferry.
Yeah,
and
I don't know if this comes from the "I Heard You Paint Houses" thing.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, The Irishman was based on that book. And I remember it's almost like a JFK David Ferry performance in the Irishman, and he's kind of some weird dude. He's accepting, I believe, it was a truck of guns, given by Jimmy,
by De Niro's character, right?
Yeah,
Frank Sheehan. Yeah,
Frank Sheehan.
And
it was also the former CIA guy,
E. Howard Hunt.
No,
too. Oh, but he was in the
Robert Morrow. His book.
Okay. I have to say, the right. So Morrow is supposedly the CIA guy. There's this whole genre of faction,
Yeah.
Again, I come from Catholicism, right? So there's a guy, Malachi Martin, who was a former priest, and he made a good living writing novels that were supposedly based on true, basically the religio political thriller, right?
You know his middle name, initial?
No.
His name's Martin. I'm just joking.
No. So, but there's this whole thing of Morrow Don DeLillo. I can start naming names that maybe I shouldn't, where you take well-known information and you create your own story out of it. And man, if you can sell that, you're good. So I'm very suspicious of Morrow, for instance.
Well, anybody that worked for the CIA, you got to be suspicious of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Well,
I mean,
or just
a lot of
anyone
guys,
who's claiming this knowledge and turning it out into books.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I'm very grateful for the opportunity that I've had to publish my JFK book. It came out very quickly.
Yeah, why don't you tell everyone where they could find that and where they could find you? I know you have a YouTube channel. I just subscribed to it today, actually.
Thanks.
So let everyone know here.
Yeah, no. So so I started off. I did 3 books on the Catholic Church, on the history of Catholic Church, and then I moved into JFK, and then on the Shroud of Turin right after the other.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's my most recent story, my most recent nonfiction.
Okay, I have to go on a tangent here.
Go.
You set this up. I'm sorry. There's a recent report on that the recent analysis of the Shroud actually did date back to 2000 something years. I am Catholic.
Okay.
Roman Catholic Italian.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on that? Because I haven't dug into it enough to.
Yeah.
I've heard both sides of it.
I'm dubious. I'm dubious. I would love to believe that the Shroud is real. I really would. I went into studying this. Actually, the book was written before anything I got into the Kennedy stuff. I just couldn't find a publisher because the Catholic world wanted me to write a pro-Shroud book. And I eventually got to the point where I'm like, I'm not seeing this. I'm just not seeing this as legitimate. I'm seeing this as a 14th century thing. Not that that's a bad thing, because in that research, I found this whole world of just this creative iconography and art that we're not interested in because, well, if the Shroud isn't real, well, then why would we bother with it? But it's actually part of this very rich medieval world that I found of crucifixion art and iconography, and just the whole medieval mind was centered on this. So anyway, I'm dubious about this quote unquote recent finding. First of all, there hasn't been an officially sanctioned dating on the Shroud since the carbon-14 dating of 1988. Which were 3 labs, which was sanctioned by the Archdiocese of Turin. So they got the approval of the church to do this test, right? And it came out from 3 different labs, secular labs out in the real world, that it came out between 1260 and 1390 AD. That was the median age, the range put together by the 3 labs. That was the dating of the cloth. Since then, there's been like, no. There's been cotton in there. There's been reweaving. There's been one thing after the other. And that these hypotheses, they're hypotheses that have come out since, is that it's basically the same people are trying to prove the Shroud over and over and over again. And the Italians that put out this most recent finding about that it's the 1st century are the same guys who've been promoting the Shroud as legitimate for years. So it's like, I need to find a way to prove that this is legitimate, right? Which is totally anti-science. How am I going to do that? And that's how they spend their time trying to come up with that. So I'm very skeptical of that. And I'm very skeptical of the claims that a lot of people say about the Shroud, like, the pollens that are found on there. Yeah, well, no, because the guy who says that there were pollens also believed in the Hitler diaries. And he said that that was a legitimate thing. That was a fraud. And that there's like 54 different pollens that have been found, that he supposedly found, that go back to like Jerusalem. And yet there's very little pollens that he found from Italy, even though the Shroud's been spending the last 500 years of its life in Italy, So it's like, what do you want me to say? I'll come up with something for you. Coins on the eyes, that it was from the Roman times. Yeah, but the same guy who says that Christ, Jesus is wearing a tefillah, and that there's writing on the Shroud that has stuff that you wouldn't hear otherwise. But if you dig into what these guys are saying, it's very, very dubious stuff. So anyway, that's unfortunately, that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not making many friends at all in the Catholic world.
I can imagine.
It'd be great if it was, authentic, but you run into these things like that, and all these various religious relics that these churches all across Europe supposedly have. I mean, one of Mary Magdalene's skull.
Right.
You have nails from the cross. You have a vial of the blood of Jesus, and it's just a piece of the wooden cross.
Which hey, I mean, for like a local church that has a tradition of like such and such saint came here and he did this, and since then every year we celebrate his whatever. That's fine. That's great. That's a tradition. And what we do with the shroud, though, is we're mixing like tradition and apocryphal history with trying to make it real, And it's like, maybe we should just embrace the mystery of faith. And people might respond to that more than like trying to convince someone of a true thing by science. And science is really questionable.
Yeah.
It's almost
science and religion put together is like you wouldn't necessarily think it's a thing. And Rob, it kind of reminds you of the isotopes found on the DB Cooper money, right?
Yeah,
we talk about this the different things found on the shroud and trying to date it. I don't know if you know about DB Cooper, James. No, that's a whole other rabbit hole. But
yeah, there is some bleed over there when it comes to suspects.
Lauren Hall,
yeah.
But I think we interrupted and as you were telling people where they could find you.
Oh yeah, so Amazon is a good place, and the last two, the Shroud book and the Mad Bishop's Early England James book was put up at Trine Day, but you can go to Amazon for everything. And then I've been doing a lot on Medium, like original articles, just posting them for free. I did like 20, as you mentioned, 25 or so on JFK. That's where I like the Mauser story and these kind of other like stories about the Klan and R.E. Davis and his role with all that's being put out there on Medium. So I'm just trying to get the word out there, man, because I'm also trying to get ahead of what may or may not come in the next whenever, right?
I think today's day 15, right?
A plan should have.
We should hear something by Monday.
So the idea was this will be presented to me. I will review it, and then from there, I'm going to decide what to do. Right? That's kind of like where we're at with the.
Well, he gave them the ultimatum after the executive order. They had 15 days to respond about their plan to release the files. So,
but there is also, Rob, there's not a current DCI director of intelligence now because Tulsi Gabbard has yet to be confirmed. So people speculate that could
push it back a
little even longer. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, we've been waiting a long time. We could wait an extra week or two, but definitely hoping we get this kind of soon.
Sooner than later, yeah.
Yeah, and your YouTube page, James Day 114. But I'm sure if you just type in James Day, you have a bunch.
Or
of
Joe, they could just follow the link in the description.
Or that was probably easier. Yes. Sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
we love Joe around here.
Yes.
Yeah. Guys, I'm honored to be here, man.
And you're welcome back anytime. You got a free pass.
Thank you.
We had a great time with you and some great information and some eye-opening facts, and definitely something to reconsider when it comes to all this far-right General Walker, Miltier stuff and the Klan, because I think all these elements were in play, and it's obvious to me that they were in play. And, then the question becomes exactly what were they doing? And that's the hard part. But people like Paul Trejo, Jeff Caulfield, are looking into this stuff and hopefully bringing us some new information and could shed some new light on some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And there's so much more that we didn't even get into tonight. But like I said, the links are in the description. You can check out his writings, his videos. And I'm sure you're going to have a new book coming out soon, probably, right?
Well, my wife says if you publish another book, I'm filing. So quit it.
Okay, so maybe not. Maybe not.
You think she'd be happy? You're on the radio. You're on the podcast. No, when are you done?
Right.
2 hours is a long time.
We hear We hear the
Yeah, we hear it too. We say this is our part-time job. You gotta look at it. You know, you gotta make a little money doing something, right? I mean, we're not getting rich here, but hey,
no, not at all.
A little something never hurt nobody, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, man. Well, happy birthday.
Thank you. It's been a good one, and you made it a better one by coming on the show. We really enjoyed having you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
And like I said, you're welcome back anytime, sir.
All right.
So here's how we end the show, James. We do a little dancing with Dean Andrews. Okay? You're going to love this. I wish we had the video to go along with it like we used to. So just as I play this music and this little voiceover, just imagine in your head Dean Andrews in a floral Hawaiian unbuttoned shirt.
Yeah.
Black sunglasses on, carrying a very feminine looking umbrella. Okay. Dancing around like the outside of a restaurant in New Orleans while trumpet and trombone players are playing all around him, and he's just dancing. He's jiving, shucking and jiving with his umbrella, just grooving to the music. And this is how we go out every time. So without further ado, Dino, where are you at, buddy? Let's see. Where is Dean? Here he is. So he says it's a parasol, not an umbrella.
The greatest lies are told in the name of truth. The greatest crimes are committed in the name of justice. The quotation is Jim Garrison's. It could be used for him or against him in this strange case. Good night.
Right, guys in the chat, thanks for hanging with us.
Thank you. Thank you, James.